Welcome to another episode of the Dentology podcast, where we discuss the business of dentistry. In this podcast series, we'll be discussing all the non-clinical aspects of dentistry, from goodwill values, finance, marketing, how to buy and sell a dental practice, mindset, through to where you can invest your money in team management issues. My name is Andy Acton, and I'm joined by my co-host, Chris Strevens. Let's jump straight into it. Another enlightening conversation with Alex Sharp this time.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, it's fascinating, isn't it? That, it's a guy that we don't know, really. First time we've really spoken to him. And this whole movement, it fits very well with where dentistry is looking at the moment, especially in those other conversations we've had with other people about dentistry. It's just fascinating, really.
Yeah, I think for me, it kind of gets to the underbelly around values. But, I mean, people will listen to it in the episode, but whilst he spoke from an associate point of view, I think as a practice owner, there's a lot of things to listen about and take on board as a business owner to make sure that you're well aligned with the people who work in your business or the people you want to work in your business.
Yeah. And I think it's a practice principle. One of the, not only do we know it's a change of environment and a change of, economy and a change of maybe Phoenix and a change of staff and staffing levels and how to attract it. It's another change that they're going to have to look at. We don't expect them to build helter-skelters in the staff room and all that sort of stuff, but I think they're going to have to start looking at this well-being and how do you retain staff and attract staff much more seriously than they have over the last 20 years.
I thought the honesty he showed in talking through his own journey was really interesting. I think people will take a lot from that episode.
Yeah, I think so.
So, welcome to our latest episode of Dentology, the Business of Dentistry podcast. And today we're delighted. We've got a guest, Alex Sharp, and Alex, a dentist. Alex, welcome to you. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks. Thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate you guys taking the time out to chat to me.
No, pleasure.
No, not at all.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, I think you've got a really interesting story to tell as well. So, I understand you say you want to be a dentist from 4 years old, which I must admit, that's a pretty early life decision. So you obviously, literally, you hadn't started school and you'd already decided you want to be a dentist.
Why?
I was going to say, did your parents give any insight?
No, there's no real reason. None of my family went to university, nothing like that. There's no dentistry in the family at all. So I don't know why. I just remember as I got older, my mum said, you always wanted to be a dentist when you were 4. And we were like, yeah, sure you do, son, sure you do. And
it's a bit random, isn't it?
Yeah. Very random. No reason.
Did you used to look like on your toys when you did you like you pretend with pretend teeth and stuff like that?
No, my parents.
Hello, let me have a look at your
No, my parents always thought I was going to go into engineering because I used to love Kinects and Lego and stuff like that, and I'd always make these big things. But don't ask me why. I decided at a very young age that's what I wanted to do. But before then, I wanted to be a hairdresser. So I think the world dodged a bullet on that day, at least.
I tell you what's interesting though, isn't it? That, the bit about engineering, in the fact that a lot of dentists are sort of almost mini engineers. They love that sort of like constructing and doing stuff, and it's interesting the fact of maybe that's the sort of crossover a bit that you liked building and.
I think sometimes people actually say the word dentist, isn't it? It's like doctor, engineer, and artist.
Yeah,
they kind of say that's kind of how you almost kind of get the word dentist, because there's engineering in there and there's a degree of artistry as well,
and psychology and therapy.
Nice. I like that. That's very clever. I like that.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like a psychologist as well at work, but
I bet. So obviously, I assume in reality it wasn't the 4-year-old Alex that suddenly just held this deep felt ambition and then pursued your whole school years to become a dentist. So what was the point when you decided that dentistry was going to be your career of choice?
It probably, to be honest, was that time. I made that decision and I didn't know anything about it, obviously. And I remember growing up, my parents were kind of like, if you really want to do this, you need to start thinking about what subjects you take, because those are going to impact things. So then I picked my GCSEs and then I picked my A-levels, and it just sort of happened, I guess. I kind of set myself that goal as a kid without really realising what I was doing, and tailored my life towards that in terms of the decisions I made.
Which is really impressive, and it wasn't easy for you, was it? Because you went to Newcastle, and I see that you failed your finals, and we've had other very high-profile dentists on this podcast who the same thing happened to them.
Also failed.
Yeah, they failed their finals, and in many ways, that for them, on reflection wasn't necessarily all bad news, whilst it felt at the time, I'm sure, the world was going to eat them up. Did that hiccup coming early on in your career, did you see that helped you in some ways?
Yeah, so like anything in the moment, you're distraught and ashamed of yourself and you've let everybody down and things like that. But then I think definitely, I went into my FD year with a totally different attitude. Second time round, I went into it with like complete gratitude of where I am and a willingness to give even more than I'd given before to make sure that I really just absorbed as much as I could, because suddenly everything shifted. I don't know, it's hard to explain, but once I achieved it, I was like, right, this is it, I'm going for it 110% every day, and I tried really, really hard, and I think that it's made me a much better dentist. There's no doubt in my mind it's made me a better dentist.
Did you have the walk of shame? Because these guys that we were talking to, they were saying that they went up to the board where everybody was like passed, and then basically, because I didn't go to university, so they went up and they couldn't find their name on it, and then someone said, "No, you're over there," and they were on a different board.
Yeah,
so
I remember.
Did you have the same thing?
Yeah, similarly. So I remember they brought out this massive piece of paper, they blue tacked it on the wall, and I scanned down the name, and I saw Shreve, and then I thought, normally on all the exam I'm after Shreve. There was before Shreve there was no sharp in there, and I just had this realization of going, shit, I've failed. And then I looked up from the board, and the fifth year was looking at me, and we looked at each other, and he came over to me and he said, should we go for a walk? And I was like, oh my God. And it was really weird, because beforehand all the clinicians are there and they're all going, oh, you'll be fine, don't worry. But most of them knew that I'd failed, because they all know before.
Oh no, really?
So I thought it must be awful for them to be like, yeah, you'll be fine, Alex, you've got this, really knowing that I haven't. And so it was awful. And I remember I went upstairs because I was pretty close to the lab team at the university, and I went up there and I spoke to some of the lab people, and some of my friends were with me, and I remember I just cried constantly. And I remember because the window was open and I could hear the dean, Jimmy Steele, giving like a big speech of congratulations and success to all the students, and I could hear it through the window, and everybody was clapping and cheering and drinking prosecco, and I was upstairs crying like, oh wow, this is, in the moment it was obviously awful, but on reflection it's like, well, that made me who I am today. So
yeah, perhaps you must have galvanized you to sort of like go, well, sod it, I blew it on there, but I'm not going to blow this year. And as you say, sets you up really, doesn't it?
And also as a life lesson that you're right, in that moment it feels like, could there be anything worse? And then you realise that as the hours and the days and the weeks roll forward, it's just a little bump in the road of life. And I think for lots of people, they get so caught up in the moment and think it's the end of the world, and there is something the other side. And you're a great example that you obviously resat your final year and you qualified, and now you're a dentist, and so it's all doable, but in those moments it's hard.
And defining moments, aren't they? That defining moment of out of adversity, because you could have said, sod it, I'm not going to do it anymore, but you didn't. And that, I think that builds us into what we are quite often.
And also being able to advise other people. I'm sure you've shared this story a number of times and talked to a number of people, either dentists who are doing postgraduate qualifications or younger people. And I bet it's been great for them to hear your experience, as hard as it was for you, to give them the confidence to push on.
Out of interest, Alex, did it have, when you were applying for FD, did it have any impact on applying for FD, or did no one really care that you were, this was you've done it on your second attempt?
No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And interestingly, I remember when I was applying for associate jobs, I was very open about that, either on my CV or just in a conversation with the practice owner. And I was amazed at how many people failed their finals that, just don't talk about it, or fail the finals and then go on to do great things. And so I had this stigma of like shame and guilt, and then it was instantly just taken away from me, because I thought most of the people I liked and respected and loved had failed as well, so it didn't matter.
But the bottom line is you're either qualified or you're not. The pathway that goes through before kind of never really gets talked about, does it? You just get that qualification. So you qualified, and then I think quite remarkably, you worked in 8 practices over a 4-year period. I mean, man, that you must have had a car or a train pass or something, because you were moving around an awful lot. What led you to move so often, and what did you learn from those experiences? Because many dentists don't work in that many practices, even through their career. And quite often we talk about people who buy a dental practice quite young. They might own that practice and work in a single surgery for 12, 15, 20 years. So what did you take from that experience of working in a number of different practices in very quick succession?
I mean, it's a really great question, and you don't have long enough, is all I'm saying. But I'll try and be as brief as possible. I think that for me, I learned an infinite number of things, and I would probably broadly bring them down to two things. I learned more about my own values, and I learned more about who I am as a person and what I need in order to be happy in dentistry. And I also learned all of the things that I don't like, which kind of sounds like the opposite side of the same coin, but I mean that from the perspective of going, when I own a dental practice, which is going to happen, I know all the things that I'm not going to do, and all the mistakes I'm not going to make. So I took away huge amounts of personal sort of insight and development, and then huge amounts of insight into the future as well about what I'm going to do. And ultimately, those negative experiences that I had, because I left those practices for a reason, helped guide me towards the journey that I'm on now, and helped to almost be the fuel for the fire of my vision that I have now in dentistry. So again, looking back, it feels weird at the time, but trying to practice a lot of gratitude, and to say, look, these things happened to me, but I'm not going to dwell on them and get angry. I'm going to say, right, well, what can I learn from them? This is just stage 1 or stage 2 of my personal evolution. So what can I take from it, positively speaking? And then look back and be grateful to those people who kindly provided me with a certain set of experiences, and say, thank you, because of your actions, I am who I am today. And I am happy and proud of who I am today. So I have to then be grateful for those things.
That's really good, actually. One of the things we say to people, we say you can learn a lot from negative experiences. We talk about managers. You can learn a lot from bad managers as much as you can learn from good managers. And in a way, they, as you quite rightly say, it's a great way of looking at it. Is you're grateful for that experience. It might not have been so great at the moment when you were going through it, but actually out of it, you've learned, I don't want to be like that.
And this is one of the things I try and, when I'm speaking to associates who are going through hardships, and or perhaps looking to make changes, I always try and tell them that, just don't be angry or bitter or resentful. Just say, look, this happened, and what are you going to do to prevent it happening again? What have you learned? And you might not believe me, but in a year's time or 6 months' time or 2 years' time, you look back and say, you know what, that experience shaped me. And so I have to be grateful for it.
And the thing is, if you're angry and bitter, the only person that affects is you, because the other person's moved on in the majority of cases, or they may not have even realised that the impact they had on you, because they were just going about their way of doing things, which didn't meet with your own values, but that's how they operate. So they didn't see they did anything wrong, whereas you're looking at it and you're like, well, I'd never behave like that. So you carrying that round is a weight on your shoulders. On your shoulders alone. It's not affecting anybody else. But for you, it obviously got quite hard, because you got to a stage where you almost were giving yourself an ultimatum as to whether you were going to leave the profession or not. So how did you get to that position? How did this kind of build up where it just felt such a negative experience that you were thinking, is dentistry for me? And then was there a kind of a turning point, a moment where you thought, actually it is for me and I need to change the way I think?
Great question again. I mean, essentially, there was that point, that tipping point, and I think that I reached a stage where I had one particular experience. I won't go into in too much detail, but I felt huge amounts of blame for being the person I am, for having the values I have, and I sort of started to think that I was the problem, that I had these unrealistic expectations, that what I was looking for didn't exist, that I just have to compromise and suck it up, and that's just how dentistry is, and all these kind of things. And so I felt like this problem child that had a CV longer than anybody, that suddenly all these practice owners are going to go, come on, Alex, you're telling me that you're not the problem whenever, all these other practices are the problem and not you. So I kind of reached a stage of thinking, wow, I'm going to eventually not be able to get a contract with somebody, because people are going to think you're just a flaky dentist or you're just a hassle. So I reached the point where I thought, well, I have to make this work for me, but I didn't know how, because I tried all these different practices. I've worked NHS, I've worked privately, I've worked in cosmetic practices, I've changed cities 3 times, I've done split days, 6 days, 1 day in a practice. I've tried everything and everything, and I could never make it work for me. And at the time, I didn't know why. And so I reached a stage of going, I can't make this work for me, and I don't see any prospect of things changing. And I think that was the nail in the coffin, because I lost hope. I thought, I don't feel any hope that my personal situation is going to get better, because I felt that I almost blamed the world and said the world needs to change to accommodate me, which was quite a selfish outlook. And I didn't see that happening. So I thought, do I continue down this kind of emotionally self-destructive path, continuing to flirt with different practices to try and find that elusive right practice? Or do I just say, well, actually, it's been a ride, thank you, and I'm going to cut my losses now, and let's look at alternatives. And I think that once where I work now, I've been here for 2 years. Now, the longest I've ever worked in, nearly 2 years in August, the longest I've ever worked in a practice is a year. So this is like a personal best for me. So, to be in a practice for that period of time is rare. And, I said to my partner, because we both moved, she left her family, left her friends, left her job. We moved house, for me, to try and make it work. And I said to my partner that if this practice where I'm in right now doesn't work out, I'm done. I'm done with dentistry, because I've tried everything and I didn't feel that there was any chance of things changing. So that for me was the tipping point.
And is the fact that you're rare, is that mean that in a way you've maybe had to do some compromising on where you wanted to be, or have you actually looked at it now and said, well, actually, this is 95% okay. So therefore that maybe the 5% that you thought you wanted or whatever, you've now decided that actually that I can do that if I'm going to do my own practice. But at the moment, this is a good position to be in.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, obviously, in the politest way, I hope the practice owners don't look on this too negatively. But yes, there's always a compromise, right? I'm a realistic individual that understands that perfection doesn't exist. It's a construct, right? So I understand that, and there is a degree of compromise. And I think that when you asked me that question about what did I learn, and I said values, I learned not just what I value, but like the priority of those values and what am I willing to compromise on. For example, honesty is my cornerstone, and without honesty, I can't build trust. And if I can't build trust, I don't want a relationship with somebody. So for me, if I worked in a practice that was dishonest, I was never going to compromise on that, and I'm going to walk away. So it kind of just depended, I guess. In this practice, I'm happy to compromise definitely on a lot of the things that aren't like negative enough for me to walk away. However, I will be honest, because it's my core value. And I will say that realistically, what keeps me in the profession now is not the practice where I work. It's my bigger vision for dentistry is what gets me up out of bed in the morning. So Mondays is the day where I spend doing it, and my other 4 days I work in clinic, and my Mondays is the best day of my week, because I love this stuff and I love what I'm trying to do. So if I didn't have this, I do honestly believe I would have left dentistry 2 years ago.
Yeah, wow. Which is, I mean, you talk about you got involved in a community about building wealth and got into property, but you said that didn't serve your values. And you said a minute ago about, you're quite sort of selfish and looking for yourself, but you've obviously got great self-awareness now because you've worked out what your values are and what's important to you. Did you know those before you went through this experience in dentistry, or was it as a result of some of these negative experiences that you took some time out and reflected on what was important to you and established what your own value system looked like?
Honestly, the latter. So I didn't know everything about myself, and I think most people don't. When I started to learn more, because the community that I joined, I networked with various individuals, and one of those individuals became my business coach who helps me with this whole vision. And we spent about 12 months literally just thinking about vision, values, purpose, goals, forming habits, mindfulness, affirmations, gratitude, all this kind of stuff that people consider to be a bit fluffy and a bit wishy-washy, non-tangible, is the infrastructure and the foundations on which I have then understood myself, and I've recently started to articulate it that I sort of realized I can only understand my external world after I understand my internal world. So I spent so long understanding myself, and it's amazing how much you can learn about yourself from somebody else that just asks you questions. You know, I couldn't just sit down and think, what are all my values and things like that. I don't think it's necessarily as easy as that. You need somebody to guide you along that path, to ask you the right questions, to bring that information out of you, because you do know, but it's in your subconscious, and you just need to pull it from your subconscious to your conscious so you become aware of it. And once you become aware of it, then you can start to use your values list as like a filter for everything that you do, for your behaviors, for your decision making, for how you would interact with other people. Everything becomes filtered by your values, and that kind of is what guides me. But if I didn't understand that at first, which I didn't, I only found that out by going through these experiences, going, this annoys me, this upsets me, but why? What is it about this person doing this action or having this behavior is upsetting me? And, you know, I'm not afraid to say I've had a therapist in the past, and I still have a therapist for various things. And to me, a therapist, a business coach, a PT, all these different professions all serve the same purpose of kind of guiding you through a journey that you don't know how to navigate yourself. And they almost hold your hand and clear the path a bit for you and say, look, why would I want to travel this journey on my own when I can use the experience of somebody else? And every single time I've learned from, they've sort of taught me what not to do and not to make their mistakes, right? By carving through a path to some extent. And so what I've tried to sort of think about is that for me, if I do that, it makes the whole personal development process so much more fun. It makes it easy, and it gives me clarity, and it avoids me getting frustrated and angry and confused. So going through those negative experiences, just to bring it back to the question, going through those negative experiences helped me refine. It helped me answer those questions that I had when I worked with a coach. And when you see it in black and white, it changes everything, because you know it.
But it's funny what you say. Yeah, but it's funny what you say about, you know, you listed off kind of a PT, you know, a personal trainer, a business coach, and a therapist. But people are so happy to talk about having a personal trainer to work on their physical, you know, abilities and their physical health. Whereas as soon as you start moving into a world of coach or therapist, people get a bit shy and a bit awkward about it. But surely health's health. You know, physical and mental health is all joined up. We spoke to Mara Kwaja, the Mind Ninja, a little while ago. She was talking about mindset and behaviour and health generally. And the sooner we can get it to a stage where people are happy to talk about it in the same way that they're proud to go to the gym 3 times a week. Yeah, we're on the right path, aren't we, of where we need to be. I know that you've actually started a Facebook group, haven't you, to help people around kind of mindset and how they think, and trying to create a forum and an environment for people to perhaps speak more openly about this. And I guess that's based out of your own experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, when I look back and I reflected upon the whole situation, I thought to myself, well, what I failed to assess and what I failed to understand was, firstly, who I am, and secondly, how I use the knowledge about who I am to find the right practice for me. And if I sort of trim away the fat, it comes down to values. Everything comes down to values. So if I know my own values and I can assess the values of a dental practice, and if I know that there is an alignment, then I believe that it will be brilliant. That's what we need. We need a practice that aligns with the associate, and we need the associate that aligns with the practice. And there's no system out there that addresses that issue. It's all a bit, well, go for an interview, look at a very wishy-washy job advert that all reads the same, get nervous and sign a contract straight away because you don't want to lose out. And then what happens is, this is the classic situation, 3-month honeymoon period, 3 months trying to address underlying issues and not being successful, notice period in, 3 months later you've left. So that was my typical 9-month journey, which is why I never lasted more than 12 months. So
just stopping there, Alex, just pause in there. So do you think that your experience is fairly typical, but what lots of people do is they have their 3-month honeymoon period, 3 months to finding out the problems, but then they just suck it up and get on with it? Do you think there's a lot of people out there that are just accepting something that doesn't meet their values, or by their own measurement is mediocre, but they just don't have the cojones, they don't have the whatever it is within them to actually make that decision to move on and find something better.
Or the understanding or appreciation, probably.
Yeah.
To a certain degree.
I do. But if you asked me about 6 months ago, I would have said probably not. But when I created the group, I tried to network with as many people as possible because I felt so alone and so isolated. And I looked at some of the other groups and, you know, nobody was posting about it really. People that were posting anonymously. There was mixed advice. There was there's a
piece you were saying about where you've got associates that kind of work in a practice, that 3-month honeymoon period, then 3 months when they kind of work out that things aren't great, and then you then decided to leave. Do you think there's a number of associates out there in a situation where they've had that 3-month period where it's not perfect, but they just stay, they just kind of accept the situation they're in, and they're not particularly happy with their lot, and perhaps it's a bit mediocre, but they never get to that final stage where they move on? Do you think there's people out there like that?
I think there's lots of people out there like that, and you know, I created the group to sort of provide an environment for associates to talk about it, because I initially thought that I was alone, and that, you know, like I said before, I was this problem child, but I realised lots of associates go through it, but they don't talk about it. We're not very aware of it because there is a bit of a fear culture in dentistry where associates are very nervous to talk about their experiences in practices. Because they're worried it's going to paint a target on their back and affect their, you know, sort of future career prospects. And people sort of think there's this little, you know, there's little circles of practice owners with a little billboard of names on, you know, and you get added on this list. But that's the culture, you know, right or wrong. That's the thing people think about. So, you know, one part of creating the group was to, you know, provide basically just an environment where other associates that have had a bad experience can share, their journey and their stories, but also learn and grow. It's not like a moaning society, you know. We're not all in there just whinging about practice, you know. Don't get me wrong, there are a few, you know, emotional people, but on the whole, I want the groups about empowering people. It's about enabling dentists really and associates to understand themselves first of all. And like I say, once they understand themselves, they can understand what they need to sort of have that better life in dentistry, which is what I'm trying to cultivate. There's so much mental health, well-being issues. The statistics for dropout and, you know, consideration of suicide is staggering. And, you know, I don't want dentists to go through the journey I've been through, reach the stage of burnout, reach the stage of wanting to quit dentistry, because this is part of the problem, right? You know, it's multifaceted why people are burning out and leaving. You know, I'm under no illusion. However, associates not working in the right practice is a huge part of that for a chunk of the workforce. You know, the majority of us are associates, not practice owners. And I think that, you know, we need to find a way of aligning the associate with the practice owner on a values-based system. And my sort of goal really is to create that system to address that underlying issue so that we can start to reduce the numbers, those horrible statistics, you know, and help with this sort of crisis, because there's lots of stuff going on in the profession right now. It's all over the media. And I'm sort of, you know, past me that thought, oh, I've got no hope, there's no change, is coming back again and going, well, what is going to change? Because I don't see anything changing. And I don't feel that we're sort of aware of it. And we're going, oh, it's terrible, you know, burnout and recruitment crisis, and we're all doing podcasts about it, and we're talking about it at the Birmingham NEC. But I'm thinking, who's doing anything about it? Who's taking charge on it? Who is, you know, we're just kind of being ambivalent and just saying, oh, it's terrible, but anyway, let's talk about composite.
It would be interesting, won't it, whether with the, you know, the hard options it is to try and recruit associates now, whether that, in a way, from a reverse way, will make principals have to look deeper into the recruitment and employment of the associates. If they've got, you know, if there's a groundswell of disaffected or associates who want things to work in a certain way, and maybe in the past the principals have not been particularly thoughtful on that aspect, then the fact of it's probably going to have to be part of maybe the recruitment process, as we're seeing in lots of other jobs, isn't it? You know, this whole mindfulness and well-being is becoming part of the job, really.
And I think some of it might just be, we have this whole thing that if people that work with us, it doesn't work out, we take the view they're just destined to be happy somewhere else. It doesn't mean they're bad people. It just didn't work out for us. And I guess what Chris was saying about that, if you've got practices where there's an awareness in the practice as what their values are and what's important to them, that would then make it easier for prospective associates to align themselves with that practice, which actually is good for everybody.
It's
because
almost a bit like Tinder for dental practices.
Exactly.
You know, practice owner and,
it's a match,
and an associate matching society.
Exactly.
Yeah, because you do want an environment where it works for everybody, and there will be the right place for everybody. But I guess your experience shows that you kind of have to work through a number of places to find the right environment for you. And whilst I think there are bad associates, there are bad principals, and there are good associates and there are good principals. And I'm not saying you put the bad associates with the bad principals, but I think you need to understand what you're getting into. You need to know what that operating environment looks like.
There needs to be a way of assessing people's values, and there needs to be a system that can, align them together. Like I say, because not every practice I've worked in is bad. Don't get me wrong. There was one or two that are absolutely awful, and I'll leave it at that. But, I'm not saying every practice that I've worked in is bad. That's not the case. It's just the values were different. There was a value mismatch, and I couldn't make that work for me. So I had to leave. So it's about having a filter for the associate to say, this is basically what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for 4 days a week for 7,000 UDAs at £12 a UDA. We ignore that. That's the kind of negligible stuff. What's really important is the values, and that's not what is on a job advert. Those are the things that are not really proved. And there's a lot of associates that I've spoken to say, I went to an interview, they told me everything under the sun, and this is my experience as well, by the way. You start working there, it's nothing like what they told you. And they take advantage, and they lie to you, and they cheat, and they deceive. And that is a big problem, because associates that I speak to are like, Alex, it sounds all well and good finding the right practice, but how do I know? And
but that's just not smart business, because the person's going to, one of the great things about dentistry is that on the dentist side, everyone's minimum degree educated. So they're smart people, smart cookies. So if somebody sells you a load of baloney and you turn up and that doesn't meet with your daily experience, there's going to be a disconnect and you're going to move on.
Well, I think the problem, Dave, that Alex is saying is that they then have a fear that they don't. It's a bit like you think the number of people who will moan about their solicitor to Frank Taylor Associates but won't say it to the solicitor because they're worried they're going to be painted in a certain picture, and I'm assuming that must be
similar. So like you say, it's that whole debate around having an open culture.
But they're going to have to change, aren't they, if they want to recruit people in a tight recruiting environment, if they get a reputation for a bit of a bunch of cowboys or whatever. It'd be interesting.
But this is the thing, I don't want it to be like a name and shame thing, I don't want anything like that. I don't think that's the right way to go about it. I think there needs to be a way of assessing a practice, because that's the most complicated thing. A practice, and the problem with this, and this is a very unpopular opinion that I will probably get a lot of flack from, but I'm not afraid to say it, that we are, as dentists, highly skilled, highly knowledgeable individuals in a tiny niche area of medicine, and we know bugger all about business, and we know bugger all about all the things we should know about management and leadership and all these things. And so there's a lot of dentists who own practices, and sometimes not even dentists, dental therapists, dental nurses, that own practices that have learned nothing about business, that there's no requirement to know anything about a business. You just buy it and it runs itself, because in dentistry we're very fortunate to work in an industry where the demand is infinite and it's automatic. If a lot of these practices I'd worked in any other industry, the businesses would have failed, because they were useless. And they were useless because they don't know anything about business. Now, is that their fault? Not necessarily, because the universities don't teach us these things. However, I think it's the responsibility of the practice owner to go on some sort of course and or have some sort of training. And I reckon there should be some sort of requirement, because some of these practices could be great, and it's just because the people at the helm just don't know. They know dentistry, they don't know anything else. And so they sort of fumble their way through, and the business always makes enough money to keep them happy,
Yeah,
right?
definitely. Yeah.
But it could be brilliant. It could be so much better, but it's not. They don't realise the potential. And so dentists will go and dentists will join, and dentists will go and dentists will join. And as long as the business is ticking over, until we start to see practices absolutely closing down completely, then we're in a real problem. But I don't think it'll ever get to that because, like I say, is this automatic?
I think the simple economics of a dental practice work quite well. So you don't need to know an enormous amount about business for it to work. Your technical experience and the support of your colleagues is enough to get by. But I guess where you're at, as you're saying, there's a difference between it being an amazing practice and a mediocre practice. And in the defence of you and your dentist colleagues, it's not your fault. As you alluded to, dental school doesn't teach anything about business. And as a patient, I really want you to be a good dentist. I don't really want you to know about spreadsheets and the difference between leadership and management. That doesn't really bother me as a patient. However, as a dentist, either as a self-employed associate or as a practice owner, it's really important you do understand those things. So you're right. I think there is a responsibility on dentists to go and source this information themselves.
Upskill themselves, yeah. Definitely.
It's interesting.
Especially with HR and people dealing with people. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that as a patient, you don't really sort of need to know that, or it doesn't really impact you. But it would impact you if there was never a nurse to work with the dentist because the practice culture was terrible. People were leaving and you had a new dentist every 6 months and, the dentist booked you in for treatment, but actually it was on a different day because the receptionist got it wrong and the dentist decided to call in sick because their mental health is so down the pan, they just decide they're going to cancel their day, which happens all the time. So it does have an impact on you, just not directly. It has an impact on you indirectly. And this is why, we've got this crisis in dentistry. Why, it's not right now. It's not really an attractive profession to go into. Would I do it again now? Definitely not. There's no doubt in my mind I wouldn't go into dentistry again. And I always have these uncomfortable conversations with patients where their kids talk, "Oh, my kid's thinking about being a dentist," and I'm like, about that. I don't think it's a great industry, but it can be and it should be. It really frustrates me because it should be an amazing industry, but it's not right now. And, it's obviously multifaceted. I'm not going to, please don't get me wrong and think I'm saying it's all practice owners. Obviously, there's loads of stuff like litigation, NHS contract, there's various causes, but this is just one of them. And this is one of them that I'm addressing,
I think you're right. I think there needs to be change. I think it needs to be addressed. I think it's just a massive multi-layered issue that is going to take a while to work its way through the profession, and there's got to be a willingness of everybody involved in the profession
participate and change,
and genuinely want to.
It's a bit like Alcoholics Anonymous
as well. Yeah,
you have to acknowledge it before you can change it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And
what would you say is the one thing that you figured out that most people haven't? Is it around values?
Good question. I think so, because if I go up to people and I say, give me your top 3 core values or your number 1 core value. People don't know. People say, well, what's a value? Or they say like wishy-washy things and people don't really understand. And to me, that's an individual that doesn't understand themselves. So when I see these dentists that are unhappy, I sort of try and have a bit of a conversation about values with them. And people don't know themselves. And I think, well, you can't be happy. If you don't know your values, how can you possibly be happy? Because you don't know what you're looking for. It's the same as not having a clear vision for your life or a clear purpose or clear goals. The greatest analogy I've ever heard for this is like a sat nav, right? So if you've got a sat nav and you're driving in your car, but you haven't put a destination in, how the hell do you know where you're going? How do you know if you've overshot your mark? How do you know how far away you are? How do you know how much fuel to use, when you need to stop and take a break? It's no wonder that we're burnt out and lost and confused because we're going 100 miles an hour in no particular direction and we've got no way of assessing if we've achieved our goals. So how will we ever feel happiness if we've never achieved what we set out to achieve? And so loads of dentists are lost because they don't get me wrong, there is an issue with practice owners, but there's a huge issue with associates as well, not understanding themselves, not understanding what they need. And the group that I have is part of a larger sort of vision that I have. I've created an association for this sort of purpose, really, as well as various other things. That is, where right now we're helping to target associates to help support them. and make the changes to address the issues. But there's other issues at stake that we're going to address as well. So I think that it's values, but I think it's kind of all of that stuff. What I would call the fluff. The values, vision, goals, all purpose. The stuff that we kind of go, don't worry about it. I can't see that on a spreadsheet on a bottom line. It doesn't affect my profitability, so I'm going to leave it alone. And I think that we need huge amounts of personal insight, huge amounts that we don't have.
I think what's great is that on the one hand, it's saddening and disappointing that you had such a grim experience in the early days, and it drove you to work this stuff out for yourself. But then as a result of that, on the positive side, as a result of that, if you can then help uplift and empower and educate and inform other people in the profession so they don't have to go through the same problems that you did, so they get a better outcome for themselves quicker, then good's going to come from it. And I think it obviously happened fairly quickly for you. And I imagine it's probably happened.
Starts a conversation.
Yeah, it's probably happened for other people, but they just haven't channeled it and harnessed it in the same way that you are.
We've accepted it.
Yes. Yeah, they're just in that round of...
It's the acceptance, isn't it?
Exactly. It's been a fascinating chat. We could talk all day, Alex. I find this whole topic fascinating. And from this, what I hope is that the listeners kind of go away and they think about what's important to them, how they run their own life, the sort of practice they're in, where they want to be in that practice. And hopefully we can kind of shape a better looking profession in the future.
Because it needs to change.
Yeah.
Yes.
Otherwise it's going to be in trouble.
You're right. And that's kind of, it feels weird to say, that my role in this, I guess, is like as a leader. And that feels very uncomfortable to say because I'm not the sort of person that tends to consider themselves like that. But my job, my role, how I consider my responsibility in this, and I do consider it like a personal responsibility to the profession now, as opposed to it was a nice idea. Now this is, this is a lifelong vision that I have. This isn't just targeting associates. This is dental practices, it's manufacturers, it's couriers, it's logistics, it's everything. Everything needs to change, and we need to really work together. But my role is to create more leaders, if that makes sense. Is to turn every associate into their own, to become a leader, to turn the practice owners into leaders, in maybe a different way than they're accustomed to. And that's why I've created an association which is designed to help with these things, and it's there's like this big master plan at play. I'm not just some guy with a chip on his shoulder that just wants to fight the system. There's a huge master plan in play here.
Burn it
I've been
down.
designing for the last 12 months, and it's about three things really. It's about the professions, the professionals, and the profession on the whole. It's about the patients and it's about the planet. We haven't touched on it today, but there's a huge environmental...
What's the association? Do you want to give it a plug so as if people are listening, they can join your Facebook group or whatever it is?
Yeah, so the Facebook group itself is called Dental Disruptors, and that's the Facebook group. It's just for associates. The actual association, so Dental Disruptors is a part of the association. It's one of the ways in which it's helping. The association is kind of the beating heart of everything. And the association is called Careful Healthcare. And I'll send a link which people can, people that aren't practice owners or other organisations, because I went to the Birmingham NEC and spoke about this there to people, and there was a lot of support from other organisations and associations. So if anybody else wants to find out more, I'll send a link with it and drop their email, and I'll keep them updated. Yeah,
well, we'll put it in the episode notes as well, so people can click directly through. I wish you all the best with it. It like you say, it sounds like this is really important to you, and it's going to be something that I think is going to feature in your life and your career for a long while yet.
It's an infinite goal. It's going to go on after I'm dead,
Brilliant.
Yeah,
no, good stuff.
We always finish up with the same two questions, Alex. We always ask our guests just to get insights.
And I'll be intrigued to see the answers.
Yeah, beyond kind of the day job that you do. So, if you could be the fly on the wall with somebody in a certain situation, when would that be? Who would you be looking in on?
I promise it's not arrogant. Right, I promise it's not arrogant. But it would be the very first date with my partner 7 years ago. Because we always look back and we always try and remember what the conversations were that we had, and try and we sort of joke about it. And I'd love to go back and listen to how embarrassing I was, how cringy I was, all the inappropriate things that I said. I would love to go back and listen to it. Then I can buzz back home and say, this is what we spoke about. This is how embarrassing we both were on that first date.
but it worked.
Yeah.
However embarrassing it was,
It
it
obviously
worked.
wasn't that bad.
No.
You got a second date. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then our second question is, if you could meet anyone, who would you like to meet?
And this is dead,
Yep.
dead, living, fact, fiction. So anybody you can think of, really.
Yeah, it's been said before, so I feel a little bit bad not being original, but I had to be honest. So it would probably be Elon Musk. And I know it's very unoriginal, but I would love to sit down with him and just talk about my big vision for dentistry and healthcare on the whole, and just see what he thinks, what he would suggest. I'd love the opportunity
Would he fund
to
it?
pick the brain of something of somebody like that. I think it would be a real great opportunity.
No, I agree. I mean, he's a big thinker, and whilst we might think that we kind of have ambitions and big ideas, the stuff that he's done and the stuff that he's going to probably do in the future, he's on another level. So no, that'd be very interesting.
Yeah.
Lovely. Cheers, Alex. Really, really enjoyed it.
It's been
I think
interesting.
it's been
Thank you.
fascinating. I think the amount you've kind of experienced in a relatively short career is enormous. And if people listening to this can take something from it, regardless of where they sit in the profession, like you say, as a provider, a partner, a clinician, a practice owner, I would hope that people would be able to take something from it and incorporate that into their own lives. So no, we really appreciate your time today. It's been great.
No, I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Alex.
Thanks
Very
for having
useful.
me.
Yeah, lovely. Cheers, Alex. Keep well.
Cheers, thank you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Dentology, where we discuss the business of dentistry. If you like what you heard, please do subscribe where you found this episode. That would be amazing. And also follow us on Instagram.